Good evening from my side, and thank you for inviting me for this evening. And I have to say it is refreshing to be the only man on the panel here tonight. But I will not abuse this situation. My daily work is cultural diplomacy, and I have to say at the very beginning, I'm not sure that I know what cultural diplomacy really is. Why I'm saying this? Austria tries to be very strong in cultural diplomacy. We're doing a lot. So I could give you also a list, like you did, about US public diplomacy, cultural diplomacy. But why? I am not sure whether the 5,000 projects we support annually worldwide are cultural diplomacy or they are arts exchange. We tend to say we can manage to have it both ways. We can say that when we do exchange, that it might be helpful to bring people closer to each other, to bring nations closer. You mentioned again the very typical role of cultural diplomacy, that is the belief that if you have more cultural relations, you do not kill each other immediately, but you understand the other better. I am not so sure whether better cultural exchange and more cultural exchange automatically means also a better understanding between people. This is an assumption we all do, in all countries, Austria included. But when we look especially in the European history, I would say countries and people who know each other quite well are also ready sometimes to fight against each other, and especially neighboring countries. Having said that, so culture is not a prerequisite, the only prerequisite for better relations. I would also at the same time say there's a fair chance that if we invest in more cultural relations, that we understand each other better. I'll give you one example from the Austrian situation. We had in the year 2002 a real problem concerning Polish-Austrian relations. Poland at that time wanted to join the European Union as other countries in the former Eastern Bloc, but the reputation Poland had in Austria was very low. When we asked people in 2001 whether you have a favorable assessment of Poland and Polish people and Polish culture, there was only about 25% who said yes, and 75% said no. So the thing that we then developed with the Polish government actually and artists from Poland was, let's try to concentrate for a full year on cultural relations and exchanges between Poland and Austria. Call it Polish Year in Austria. And then we checked after the year. So we had an opinion poll after the year whether it really changed the mind of people in this country. And I was very surprised. 5% more had a favorable image of Poland in Austria after this massive attempt to invade Austria with Polish culture. So possibly it is possible to use cultural exchange if you do it in the right way, and if you do it on a citizens level, to change reputation and image of countries. Why are we doing this if this is not for sure? I would say we're doing it because it is a much better approach to relations and diplomacy than only what you call hard power. And I'm mentioning the term hard power here because in the also theoretical context of what international relations should be, every country is thinking about how much hard power should we use and how much soft power should be used. And I was very interested to see that in the United States over the last 15 years, this discussion about cultural diplomacy turned into a discussion about soft power. There is some researcher called Joseph Nye, who even then, after he wrote a book on soft power, was invited to prepare a study, I guess already for the incoming US administration, how the American people after 9/11 and after the Iraq war can possibly become more popular worldwide, how they can sort of strengthen their credibility. I would have said this is possibly not only related to a good or a less good cultural diplomacy, it has to do with policy also. So one of the things that I would like to stress here is whatever we do in cultural diplomacy, you should never try to be too far away from real politics and from the real situation in your own country and also your own artistic scene. So don't believe that with cultural diplomacy you can create images which do not relate to reality. And this is not something far-fetched to say, because when I realized, may I criticize the former administration in the United States? Am I allowed?
These are your remarks.
I am allowed. When the second Bush administration, it became clear that hard power alone will not solve the problems for the United States. The administration decided to have a secretary called Karen Hughes, who had the direct job from President Bush to create a new network of cultural diplomacy, to use all the possibilities of soft power to change the image of the United States, which presumably was seen as being too negative because of the Iraq War worldwide. The result of this was that Karen Hughes retired even before President Bush. The end of President Bush's administration, because the idea was that Karen Hughes was given, the brief was given was to provide the world an image of the excellent cultural expectations and values of the American nation. And this has been, I think, from the very beginning, a problematic approach. Because when you really want to do cultural diplomacy, you have to accept that excellency is quite equally divided among the nations. It's not good to start with the idea that you know better than the others. And so the recipe that we try to follow in our cultural diplomacy is saying that it's not so much about teaching others about the qualities of our own culture or our traditions. It's much more about trying to network, bring people together, try to make them work together, and hopefully out of this comes also some sort of interest which relates people to each other, so that, and as a consequence also improves the image and reputation of other countries. I believe, and this is already my final sentence, is I believe that we need a lot of investment in this. And I'm not satisfied, I have to say, with any of the efforts in European countries, including my own country, Austria, where we would need much more investment in our cultural diplomacy. But I have to say, there is some hope in the United States now, because, as you mentioned, the Obama administration has promised through Secretary Clinton that a new term will be realized in your way you do diplomacy, which is called smart power. Again, I'm not so sure what it really means, but Hillary Clinton used it in her first speech in front of the Congress. She said that the future of diplomacy of the United States depends very much on smart power. I'm a poor Austrian, so I'm not sure what smart power may mean, but when we asked then the Americans, they said, well, that's a clever combination of hard and soft power. I was as wise as before got this answer. Where I think it is, we have to work on is what was also mentioned by the new administration is we should invest in citizen diplomacy. People should talk to each other, so we need the investment of people who are interested to work together. I believe that the world is a battle for the minds, and that's, if politics wants to change minds of people, they have to accept that. But I prefer that artists, writers, and others do this on a very concrete, direct level, and hopefully more than they did it so far, also between Austria and the United States. Thank you.